Welcome to Eco Community Conversations, everyone, made possible by Earth Gives. We're a 501c3 impact organization working to catalyze environmental philanthropy and amazing organizations. Right now, giving just sits at 2% of all giving, and we're working to expand that so organizations can have a greater impact on the environment and on climate. And today, we're having conversations with people who are doing just that, so that you can sort of learn a little bit more about the inside scoops on what these organizations are doing for and with us. I'm Rhonda Bannard. I'm the founder of Earth Gives, and right now we're working on scaling Earth Gives Day. And today is an exciting day because we are joined by the first ever nonprofit to join Earth Gives Day. So we're truly in the presence of a pioneer, David Lawlor with Western Environmental Law Center. Woo! So
Yay.
Always in our history, you will be in that incredible spot. So thank you very much for that. Yep. So please share a little bit about you and where you're joining us from.
Yeah, so my name is David Lawlor. I am the Director of Development at the Western Environmental Law Center, which is a 501c3 nonprofit environmental law firm. We are headquartered here in beautiful Eugene, Oregon, where it is a sunny day. And that's where I'm coming to you from.
That's fantastic. So we're going to jump right into like good wisdom. So what piece of advice or wisdom would you give to the average everyday individual on what they can do to impact, support, take care of the environment, or play a role in the climate crisis?
Yeah, I would say two things. The first thing I would say is get outdoors and know a landscape. So I was a reader of the Norwegian philosopher Arne Naess, and one of the points he made over and over again was that you can't protect something if you don't know it and love it. And he said you need to get outdoors, go to your local forest, your river, your desert, mountain, whatever it might be, and get to intimately know it, spend time there. And as you do, you'll form a connection innately to that landscape. And then when the time comes that it's being threatened by industry or it's being threatened by climate change or whatever the threat might be, you're going to be invested in it and you're going to want to defend it. So I think getting outdoors and experiencing landscapes is one of the most important things people can do. And I think it's something we sometimes overlook in the bevy of other things that can be done. So that'd be the first thing I would say that would make sense to do. The second thing I would say that makes sense to do is to vote for politicians that support environmental efforts, that are supporting of efforts that are going to mitigate climate change, and take that action. Because when it really comes down to it, we kind of do the work on the back end where we go to court and we sue the federal government or industry to stop the bad thing from happening. Well, the reason we had to do that was because the bad thing happened in the first place. So if we can get into office folks who are stopping the bad thing from happening on the front end, then the work that we do will be less and less vital, which I'm not trying to put myself out of a job. I'm not doubting that anytime soon there isn't going to be issues that need to be confronted in the courts in regard to the environment. But I think voting for pro-environment, pro-addressing climate change candidates is a great thing people can do.
Great wisdom. So share your story. How did you come to this? How did David come to this work?
Sure. So I did not grow up as a kid who spent a lot of time hiking and camping outdoors. My dad was really sick when I was a young kid, and he essentially was disabled. We weren't able to really do outdoors things like that. So once in a while with an uncle or a friend, I might go camp, but it wasn't a regular part of my life. And when I went to college, undergraduate school, I did at San Francisco State University. And when I moved there, I met a whole bunch of people who did go outdoors and who did, camp and hike and raft and do these types of things. And that's how I got into it. I started going along with these folks and doing things outdoors and enjoyed it. And I think I did that for a few years without having any deeper connection to environmental philosophy or thought or the environmental movement, just enjoyed doing outdoor recreation. But as I grew a little bit older, I started to be involved more in social justice issues, and environmental issues kind of came hand in hand with that. And the more and more I thought about those issues, I got more interested. And I had some friends who had left the Bay Area and moved up toward Humboldt County, California, which is a very crunchy, eco-friendly hippie kind of place. And I remember I went and visited them one time, and they had this book, and it was called Deep Ecology, Living as If Nature Mattered. And I said, what's this book about? It's by a guy named Bill Duvall, who was a professor of sociology at Humboldt State University. And so I picked it up and started reading it. And the book kind of blew my mind because it was saying things I had never heard anybody say before on a TV news broadcast or in a magazine or anything like that. It was essentially saying that, you know, we should treat the natural world, all the way from trees and rivers and animals, with the same reverence that we treat human life. And that might sound like a trite thing to say, but it's actually a pretty intense thing to say when you think about it. And I'm not claiming now that all this time later I ascribe to everything that's in that book. I probably don't per se, but it's what inspired me to kind of start on that path. I've always been a person who, if there's some kind of new vanguard thinking at the edge, I want to know about it, just because I find it interesting, even if I agree with it or not. I just think it's interesting to read that type of stuff. So that's kind of what sparked it. And then from there, you know, I continued doing outdoor recreation. But then I started I'm always been a big reader, so I started reading. So all the classic kind of stuff, Silent Spring, what was the John McPhee book? It was Travels with the Archdruid, where he goes with David Brower from Sierra Club around. Just all these types of books and literature I began reading. Got excited about it. This is end of undergraduate school, right after undergraduate school. And so then I decided to go back to school, and my graduate degree is technically in social sciences, but it was an environmentally focused program. And from there, after graduation, I started working in the nonprofit environmental sector. And that's what's brought me to where I am today.
That's fantastic. So share a bit about where you are today and a little bit how WELC even got started, which of course inspired me because I'm fond of owls.
Yeah. So the reason the Western Environmental Law Center has its headquarters in the somewhat unlikely location of Eugene, Oregon, is because we respond from the University of Oregon School of Law. So in the 1980s, the University of Oregon School of Law had an environmental law clinic. And this clinic had students overseen by professors who would file real lawsuits in court and see them through. And they started suing the timber industry in Oregon. And at the time, 70s, 80s, timber was king in Oregon, and to take on the timber industry was a pretty tall task. And the Environmental Law Clinic at the university started winning some of these cases. And a big piece of the litigation that allowed them to win was the Endangered Species Act and how it related to northern spotted owls. So northern spotted owls were added to the endangered species list. And because they live in the forests of the Northwest, and including in Oregon, that law and the owls listing of that law, on that law, could be used to block timber sales. So that's what happened. And after a string of victories, the timber industry came to the Oregon legislature and said, how come our state university is suing us and blocking our logging, and in their mind hurting our economy? We don't like this. And they told the legislature, you know, you better do something about it. The legislature came to the University of Oregon School of Law and said, either you stop this and disband the clinic, or you're going to shut down your law school. Which seems like a pretty crazy thing to say now, and I think it was a pretty crazy thing to say. Would they have followed through on it? Who knows? I think it was a serious enough threat, though, that it was taken seriously. And so the law clinic was spun off into an independent entity, a 501c3, that became the Western Environmental Law Center. So that's where we came from. And that happened in 1993 as the official date of our founding, although that prior iteration had been around for quite a while. From there, we branched out, and we have offices across the West in New Mexico, Colorado, Montana, up in Seattle. We have satellite folks in Portland and Bend. And so we're kind of all over the place now. And our work focuses on everything west, the Rockies and West, with the exclusion of Alaska and Hawaii. And essentially what we do is we are the lawyers for the environmental movement. So we go to court on behalf of our clients. And our clients range from big groups like the Sierra Club and Center for Biological Diversity, down to smaller grassroots groups like Cascadia Wildlands, which is a great group here in Eugene. So that's what we do and kind of how we came to be. And we've grown a lot. I joined the organization in 2013. We were 14 people, and we just hired a couple of new attorneys. And right now I think we're at 31. So we've more than doubled our staff in the past 9 years. And we've also more than doubled our annual revenue in the past 9 years. So a lot of growth, So we're doing well, but uh, I can't tell you how often it is the case that our capacity is not where it needs to be to match the amount of requests we receive. We are reached out to all the time by other nonprofit environmental groups, citizens, all sorts of people asking us if we would engage on a specific issue. And we have to be selective, and we can't do them all. And there are plenty of very good cases we would like to do that we just do not have the capacity or time to do because we only have so many attorneys and so much time. I think we could double again and be 60 people and still wouldn't really meet the need. There is so much work that can be done, and there are a lot of great groups doing that work. There are a lot of other groups with attorneys like us who are concentrating on these issues, but it's the scale of the environmental and climate problem in the US and the world, and then in the Western US where we focus, is immense. And as you mentioned in your intro, Rhonda, 2% of all philanthropic giving goes to environmental sector, which I think some people would be surprised at. I was when I first learned about this a while back. Lots of philanthropic giving goes to other concerns, and it's not to say those other things aren't worthy, they are. But given the situation we find ourselves in, I don't think any of us would be upset if it doubled to 4% or 8%, or if there was a larger percentage of it going to our groups so that we can do more work.
So you're weaving right into the next question, and perhaps you already answered it, but what would be possible if there was more support, more investment, more knowledge of the work you do?
Yeah, I think a lot could be possible. I think there's a lot of smaller site-specific fights that happen that we have to sit out because we don't have the capacity, that other groups sit out because they don't have the capacity. There's big stuff that happens, like, for example, earlier this year in February, we won a federal lawsuit to get wolves relisted on the endangered species list. Big victory, everybody's happy, it's in the newspaper, et cetera. So that's a big case that we worked on and other groups worked on as well. But there are plenty of smaller, under the radar type issues that don't make it to the front pages and that you don't even ever hear about that could be litigated or could be advocated for. So, I mean, I can give you some specific examples. One that we actually are doing, but easily could have been one of the types of issues that fell under the radar, is they've, on the Helena, Lewis and Clark National Forest in Montana, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is attempting to change the wildlife standards for the forest. And this would mean that there would be logging allowed where it previously wasn't, but the forest provides hiding cover for all sorts of different wildlife species. And if it's logged, that hiding cover is gone, which means more hunting of elk, which means more possible interactions with wildlife species like bears, wolverines, and lynx. It would mean also more road building allowed, more travel on the forest. So, but the Helena, Lewis and Clark National Forest wildlife standards aren't going to be on the front page of the New York Times. And we have a little bit of grant funding, and we have an attorney who lives in the Helena area and knows about this case, so he's taking it on. But that's easily the type of thing. There are other examples like that we just don't have the capacity to take on. So I think there's a lot of that site-specific stuff. But there's also big things too that I think could use more attention. Right now, the U.S. Forest Service is going through a revision of the Northwest Forest Plan. The Northwest Forest Plan is a landmark piece of legislation signed by President Clinton that designated the forests of the Northwest as a protected entity kind of holistically, all the way from far northern California up to Oregon and Washington. And they're looking to revise that plan. And we have assembled a coalition that we're leading along with the Wilderness Society to ensure that issues such as climate, wildlife protection, wildfire are all taken into account when the plan is revised. And we've been doing that work for the past 4 or 5 years. Again, not something you're probably hearing about in newspapers, but it's a big fight. And this covers tens of thousands of acres of forest land. And that's the type of, I think, work kind of behind the scenes and quiet that folks might not know about, but that is desperately needed. And the more of that kind of work we can do that's maybe not super sexy, but is necessary, the better off we'll be.
So I'm so lucky to be working out of, the state of Washington and meandering through on these incredible walks and just marveling at all the trees. I come from a desert climate
Right.
of Arizona. And I just think about you know, we just take it for granted. We don't think about all the work that happens behind the scenes. And so you
Sure.
just really painted a picture around what it is that happens. So give us a few interesting insights into the work that you do on an average day. You're a development director, but you know, it's varied and it's interesting, or, you know, maybe there's just a peek inside what you do, or some of your teammates.
Sure. So my job, I could describe it in a way that makes it sound interesting, or I could maybe describe it in a way that makes it sound a little bland. And it's a little of both, probably like most people's jobs. You know, I spend a lot of my time in the charitable foundation world doing grant writing, talking to foundation officers at charitable foundations about our work, and managing that whole process of getting grants in the door to fund the pro bono legal work that we do. So some of that's sitting behind a computer and writing things. Some of it's meeting on Zoom with the program officer in Seattle at a foundation, you know, so that's a lot of what I do. I also work with our individual donors. So everyday folks, from small donors who are giving you $5 or $10 up to folks who give 5- and 6-figure gifts. And I talk with them on Zoom, and the pre-COVID times, a lot of it was in person. I would travel across the Western US, meet with folks in their homes, meet with them over coffee or lunch, and give them updates on what we're working on. They would tell me about their concerns. Either sometimes their concerns would be generalized, like climate issues en masse, and sometimes it would be very specific to where they live and something that was happening in their backyard. And those conversations were always interesting to get a gauge. You really get to understand how people are thinking about environmental or climate issues, not from, you know, media reports, but by actually sitting down and talking to people. And I've made, I mean, it sounds kind of awkward in a way because I'm asking these people for money, but I've had friendships develop from these meetings. And it's an interesting thing when you meet with people, you talk about awkward subjects that can sometimes be awkward, like money, and you get to know them, and you kind of form kind of a special bond. So, you know, I have donors who have made estate gifts to us that, you know, were in their will, and that's a pretty intimate thing to talk about and to make a decision about. So it's kind of like you have to show some, you're honored to kind of be brought into this inner circle of their life, and they're putting a lot of trust in your organization, and that's a big deal. And I think that trust is built through putting in that time and effort of talking with them, explain to them, you know, what we do, thanking them and appreciating what they do, both in terms of giving to us, but just what they do in their personal lives. And what I've really learned more than anything over the years of doing fundraising is that it does not pay to be dishonest. It does not pay to take things for granted. This is something I've learned over my career a lot is, you know, the person who gave you $10, $20, $50 a year passes away, and you find out, you know, you were in their will and you're now getting $500,000. That is not something that would happen super infrequently. That happens. And that's a reason why you want to treat all your supporters and donors with respect and appreciation. But that's not the main reason. When I worked at Earth Justice, I had a coworker, Terry, and he used to tell me this when I was younger then, but I'm glad he told me this because it stuck with me forever. He said, you know, the old grandma down in Southern California is sending you $10 to protect the grizzly bears. That $10 every month might be really important to her budget on a fixed income, and she's deciding to send some of it to our organization. So whether or not she ever gives us more than $10 a month, we need to respect that and appreciate that. So I think I'm kind of an introverted person, and meeting a lot of people through the fundraising world has been interesting for me because I think I have opened up to people a little bit more, gotten to know, you know, different kinds of people a little bit more, and has just, I think, changed my approach to how I think about people and interact with people, and made me a person who has more compassion, sympathy, care about people in general, and about the supporters that I meet with. So all the way from the bland of sitting behind a computer and writing about technical grant documents to that kind of, you know, more one-on-one personal work. And just thinking of this too, I'll just end all my babbling here with, you know, this month, our organization for the month of August, if you give us a donation, we'll match it dollar for dollar up to $5,000 thanks to Mountain Rose Herbs, which is a local company here in Eugene. And so I was reaching out to some of our supporters by email and just saying, hey, we're running this promotion this month. If you wanted to give, this would be a great time. Let me know if you want to talk. And one of these folks down in Southern Oregon, him and his wife, they're older, and I've met with them at least twice, I think, maybe 3 times in the past, just over coffee and lunch, chatted with them, and they've given to our organization a number of times. And so I emailed them and I said, hey, Gene and Peggy, this promotion's going on. Would you like to give this month? And Gene wrote me back and he said, oh, thanks so much. I've seen you guys have had some great victories lately. I actually just sent the check. You should get it soon. And sorry to let you know, Peggy passed away 3 weeks ago. I was like, no, like, I know these people. I mean, I don't know them, they're not my grandparents or anything, but I know these people, and I've met with them and talked with them. And it's weird when you develop these relationships with people that aren't family and aren't technically your friends, but you know them in a friendly way, that it actually impacts you when you hear some news like that. And so that's the interesting human element here. I think that sometimes we can think of fundraising as this awkward thing about, had a donor once tell me, so you turn people upside down by their ankles and shake nickels out of their pockets, huh? And I said, yeah, not quite.
I think the great wisdom that even somebody at Neon One, who is our tech platform partner, talked about is, build a relationship with the people, not the money.
Yes.
Don't chase the money.
Yes, that'll serve you well.
Invite in the people. And really, in my life experience and my work, that's what I'm really hoping to do here. Yes, we're starting out with this idea of giving, but the idea of philanthropy for us is really about building a community of people who are connected, who see one another, who learn from one another, and give and invest in the things, that bring us all together, that support all of us. There is no, what the work of WELC does is not impacting just one person, it's impacting all of us, literally all of us globally. So yeah, I think that's really powerful.
In the world of philanthropy, I'll just say, in the world of philanthropy, things that will serve you well: trust, honesty, be genuine, sincere, and build those relationships and appreciate those relationships. I think that will serve you better than any kind of slick car salesman pitch you can never dream of.
Right. Exactly. Good. That's excellent wisdom for all the nonprofit folks who might be listening to this. So 2 more questions. How would you describe an earth giver?
I would describe an earth giver as smart, because they recognize that, like we said, this is an underfunded sector that needs support, and that this sector is addressing issues of critical importance. I would describe them as generous, because anybody who decides to make philanthropic gifts is a generous person who's thinking beyond their own immediate circle. Yeah, I think those are the 2 main ways I would think of them, as smart and generous. I mean, I could go on and think of other adjectives. Those are the first 2 that come to mind.
Thanks. So what other resources, you mentioned a bunch of books that you read at the beginning, but what resources would you suggest people, a book, a podcast, a film, anything, to get to know a little bit more about this area?
Oh boy, so many different, directions you could go with that one. I think it depends on what kind of person you are. So I'm a book person, so I'm not going to recommend a movie or anything like that. I watched Don't Look Up and I thought it was okay, but I don't know if it made me jump off the couch to save the climate. I think there's 2 kinds of people maybe when you read books, and sometimes you're the same person, and it depends on what time. I'm going on vacation soon. I'm not bringing a technical book that's hard to read. I'm bringing easy reading, right? So if you're a technical reader though, and you like things that are a little more in the weeds and a little more complicated, I think, a classic book that has some storytelling, but also has a lot of science. It's like Silent Spring by Rachel Carson would be a great selection. That's a classic. I think it shows you a snapshot of the time when science was only first being introduced into addressing environmental issues, and kind of see what that evolution looks like at the very beginning would be an interesting way to go. And she's a really great writer who paints a good picture. So I think that would be a great one on the more kind of technical science side. But also I think, when it comes to environmental protection, I sometimes, I kind of go back and forth, and sometimes I'll read kind of an outdoor recreation adventure kind of book just to get me excited about the outdoors and being outside. And I just read a great book called Kings of the Yukon. And the writer travels along the Yukon River through Alaska and Yukon, Canada, following the king salmon runs. And he stops at different villages and speaks to people, and stops at different towns and speaks to people about their remembrances of how big the salmon runs used to be, and the Native American cultures that were built up around salmon runs that are now being impacted by their diminishment. But in addition to some of the science behind king salmon, it was just a great adventure book. Somebody traveling down the river and having different experiences and describing landscapes and camping in the rain and meeting different folks. And so I kind of like to go back and forth. So Kings of the Yukon, if you want something more fun and maybe adventure to get you excited about preserving the outdoors. And I don't think you can go wrong with Silent Spring if you want to read some more technical scientific type literature about the environmental movement. Books resonate with me. I feel like books stick with me longer than TV shows and movies. So that's why I'm going the book route.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your insight. It's
Yeah,
great having you on the debut of the Eco Community Conversations. We're thrilled to get to know you a little bit more about what WELC does, and always championing the world and what's right on our behalf. So appreciate you spending some time with us.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rhonda. My pleasure.